There is a jar in an old Greek myth that can never be filled. Not because no one tries, they try forever. Water goes in at the top and it's gone before it reaches the bottom because the jar is full of holes and the punishment isn't the labor. The punishment is that the labor never ends. You don't know their names, but you've met their jar. It's the drawer full of chargers that stopped charging, the shoes that lasted one wet season, the blender you replaced twice this year, every one of them a hole. And every hole gets patched the same way, with another hour of your life sold back to work, so you can buy the next cheap thing to replace the last cheap thing. You didn't choose this. Nobody sits down and decides to carry water in a broken jar forever. It happens one small purchase at a time, each one so cheap it feels like nothing. That's the trick. A leak you can't feel is still a leak. Here's what almost no one says out loud. Cheap is not the opposite of expensive. Cheap is a loan, and like every loan it comes due, just not in money. In hours you haven't lived yet, already spoken for. Think about the last thing you bought because it was the cheaper option. Maybe it felt smart, frugal even. But somewhere inside you, a quieter voice noticed the seams weren't quite straight, the plastic felt thin, the price was suspiciously kind. You silenced that voice because the alternative, spending more now, felt like the bigger loss. But loss doesn't disappear when you look away from it, it just changes shape and shows up later wearing a different face. Physicists have a law for this, and it has nothing to do with money. It says that in any closed system, energy always leaks toward disorder. You can slow it, you can never stop it. Every engine, every star, every human effort bleeds a little heat it will never get back. Your paycheck is a closed system too. Every dollar that leaves it either builds something that lasts or it leaks, and once it leaks, no amount of hoping brings it back. Buy the coat that survives 5 winters, and the energy you spent earning it is still working for you 5 winters later. Buy the coat that survives one, and that same energy evaporated in October, and you didn't even notice it happening because the coat was still technically yours until the day it wasn't. This is where the trap tightens, because when the cheap thing fails, your first instinct isn't to question the pattern, it's to fix the immediate problem. You need a coat, so you buy a coat. Cheap again, because money's tight, because remember, it's always a little tighter than it should be, and you've never quite asked yourself why. Here's why: you've been paying a second bill you never agreed to. Call it the replacement tax. Every flimsy purchase doesn't just cost what you paid for it. It costs what you'll pay again in 6 months, in a year, forever, because it was never built to end the need, only to interrupt it briefly. And to cover that second bill, something in your week has to give. Usually it's time, an extra shift, a weekend that used to be yours, a yes to overtime you would have said no to in a version of your life where the jar didn't leak. So you work more to buy more cheap things that break faster, so you work more. Read that sentence again, slowly, because most people never do, they just live inside it. Now look closer at what that loop actually costs, because the number is bigger than it feels. Say a pair of cheap shoes lasts 4 months before the sole splits. A better pair, twice the price, lasts 3 years. Do the math honestly, and the cheap pair costs more, not a little more, considerably more, once you count every replacement. But you never see that total, because it never arrives as one bill. It arrives as 9 small ones, spread across 3 years, each one small enough to ignore. That's the real design flaw in how we think about cheap. We're built to notice a single sharp cost and forget a slow leak entirely. A thief who takes everything in one night gets remembered. A leak that takes a little every week becomes furniture. You stop seeing it, it just becomes how things are. Somewhere in that loop, a strange thing happens to how you feel about work itself. It stops being a choice and starts being a debt collector. You're not earning towards something anymore. You're bailing out a boat with a hole you refuse to look at. And the boat doesn't just cost you money. It costs you the hours that money represents, hours that don't come back, spent replacing objects that were built, quietly and deliberately, to need replacing. That's not an accident of cheap manufacturing, that's the business model. A thing that never breaks only sells once. There's an old idea in ethics, one that predates every finance book ever written, that a person owes something to who they will become. Not to society, not to a boss, to their own future self, the one who has to live with today's decisions. Every time you patch the leak instead of fixing it, you're quietly breaking a promise to that person. They inherit the debt, they just don't know it yet. Picture that future self for a moment, not as an abstraction, as someone specific. The version of you 18 months from now, still buying the same cheap version of the same object for the fourth time, wondering vaguely why nothing ever seems to stick, why the same shortfall keeps appearing at the end of every month like clockwork. That person didn't fail, they inherited a jar, and they're about to hand it down again unless something interrupts the pattern before it reaches them. Here's the moment where the story usually turns, and this is that moment. The way out isn't earning more. People assume the leaking jar just needs a bigger bucket, more hours, more hustle, more overtime to outpace the drain. It feels logical, work harder, buy more, solve it with force. But you cannot outturn a hole. Pour water faster into a jar that leaks, and all you've done is work harder to stay exactly where you started. The exhaustion goes up, the water level doesn't, you can only close the hole. Closing it doesn't look dramatic, it looks almost boring, which is exactly why it works and why almost no one talks about it. It means asking one different question before every purchase, not can I afford this, but will this still be mine in 3 years, or will it just be a debt wearing a receipt? It means choosing the object that ends the need, instead of the one that merely postpones it. Fewer things, heavier things, things that don't ask to be replaced. It also means accepting a strange kind of discomfort up front, paying more today, for less to think about tomorrow. That trade feels wrong to a mind trained by decades of get it cheap now. It isn't wrong, it's just unfamiliar, and unfamiliar is not the same as unwise. The jar stops leaking the moment you stop pouring water into holes and start pouring it into something that holds. And something changes in you when that happens, not instantly, but steadily. The frantic replacing slows down. The overtime you used to take without thinking starts to feel optional again because it is. Hours you were quietly bleeding into other people's cheap products start showing up in your own life instead, as rest, as choice, as room to breathe, not because you earned more. Because you stopped losing what you already had. This is what real freedom actually looks like, not luxury, not more stuff, fewer holes, a jar that finally holds what you pour into it. There's a second half to that old myth, one that gets told far less often. The punishment wasn't permanent because the jar was unfixable. It was permanent because no one ever stopped to check if it could be mended. They just kept carrying water, convinced that more effort was the only answer they had. You have an answer they didn't. The next time something cheap and easy is sitting in your cart, ask yourself quietly which jar you're filling, the one with the hole or the one that finally holds. Because somewhere down the road, that answer decides whether your hours belong to you or to something that was never built to last in the first place.